What is up, gentlemen? NYGA 31 here, Madden 18, opening week of the NFL season. Got a lot of good games going on in college football this evening. I'm kind of simultaneously watching Oklahoma, Ohio State, Clemson, Auburn, and of course my Fighting Irish against Georgia. You also have USC, Stanford, and Nebraska, Oregon, all more or less going on at the same time. It's nuts. But anyhow, in this video, as a backdrop, you're going to see some Madden Ultimate Team games as a backdrop to this video, and I'm going to, as part of my, I guess, two-part NFL preview, I'm going to discuss an article that ESPN insiders did. Basically, what they've done the past couple of years, it's a fun little thing that they do, is that every year, they poll executives, assistant coaches, scouts, and put together a tiered list of all the starting quarterbacks in the league. They tier them 1 through 5, and they go through and give their explanations as to why a certain quarterback is where they are. The way they break it down, tier 1, those are your franchise quarterback, a term that I feel personally is overused. To me, a franchise quarterback is someone who, year in and year out, makes your team relevant. Every year, you're penciled in for, at worst, 10-6, maybe a 9-7 down year here and there. But generally speaking, he's a guy who overcomes everything. He overcomes bad coaching. He overcomes no running game. He overcomes having a bunch of 5'8" wide guys who run 4'7". Bad offensive line, no biggie. I'll pull a rabbit out of my hat and make something happen. Bad defense, whatever. I'll chuck the ball 50 times a game and we'll put up 35 points every single week. They operate with no restrictions. The tier 2 guys are most of your really good quarterbacks. They're really good. They're good enough to win with, but they're not quite that elite guy. They have either a fatal flaw, they throw an INT or take a sack or fumble the ball at the wrong time. They may be a guy who's really reliant on a stud receiver. They may be reliant heavily on, run, play action pass game, and may struggle when they have to get into a, throw every down scenario in a come from behind situation. They could be a guy who's heavily reliant on a particular offensive coordinator or a head coach and don't quite function quite as well in other systems. Stuff like that. They're fantasy football quarterbacks. They're your MVP of your fantasy league, but they just have something that's missing. Tony Romo. Tony Romo was your classic tier 2 quarterback. Stats always look great. You can win a lot of games in regular season with Tony Romo. You can win a playoff game or two with Tony Romo. But there's always that one mistake at the worst possible time. And that's what prevents him from being that tier 1 type of quarterback. Tier 3s. These guys fall into a couple of categories. One is your game manager. They need to be coached up. They need to have a strong supporting cast. They need to have a strong defense. The stronger the parts around him, the better he looks. But if you ask him to do too much, he gets exposed. Your enigmas, they fall into this category. Guys who are really talented but streaky. They can throw for 300 yards and 4 TDs one week. They can throw for 3 or 4 INTs the following. They're streaky. You're never quite sure what guy you're going to get. They can look great for half the game and then completely crap the bed the second half of the game. And just generally drive everybody crazy. This also includes your young up-and-coming guys. They show signs of being really good, but they just don't have the body of work yet. Tier 4s are guys who should be backups, but are starting, and their teams cannot wait to find anyone to replace them, but they either have drafted somebody and they've crapped out, they've made a bad free agent signing and they're forced to play the guy. Something along the line did not go as planned, and you have a journeyman leading your team. And then finally, tier 5 are the guys who are fortunate to even be in the NFL. Alright, so let's go into the list. Tier 1. Tier 1, they have 5 guys. To me, there's only 3, and that's the Holy Trinity. Brady, Rodgers, Roethlisberger. Those guys are automatics to me. Those are the guys who you just say, yeah, as long as those guys are taking snaps for those teams are going to be relevant, and anytime they get into the postseason, they're going to be dangerous. They have Drew Brees as a tier one. I think Drew's in a tough spot in his career. He's not quite where he was, 4 or 5 years ago, but he's still plenty good. And he's on a team where they have to score 35 points a game to keep the game close. He and Sean Payton have been around forever, but you're getting a lot of 7 and 9s lately. Granted, the division is good and getting better. You have the Falcons, Panthers, and the Bucks. But really, at this point in their careers, what's the difference between Drew Brees and someone like Philip Rivers? And I'm a huge Philip Rivers fan. I'm a huge Drew Brees fan, but I don't think he's, at that same level as those other three. I think he's down a notch. Still very good, but he can't carry it on his back anymore. He can't mask his team's shortcomings. So, for that reason, I think he's down, just a smidge. The fifth guy they have on here is Matt Ryan, Matty Ice. Is Matty Ice a tier one? I've watched Matty Ice forever, way back when he was at Boston College and playing Notre Dame. I like Matty Ice. I need to see another year like last year again. I think Julio Jones helps him out an awful lot, obviously. I think the backs really help him. And the way I, look at it is if you take Julio Jones off that team and replace him with, say, I don't know, let's not be disrespectful, T.Y. Hilton. T.Y. Hilton, really good player. But he's not Julio Jones. How many of those throws where he locks on to Julio and says, hey, Julio, just go up and get it? How many of those turn into picks? I mean, it's tough. He's really a 1.5, but I just can't call him a tier one. So I'm going to go tier two for Matt Ryan. I'm going to disagree with them on Drew Brees and Matt Ryan and leave tier one to, the Holy Trinity. Brady, Rodgers, Big Ben. Tier two, there are some interesting guys that they have in tier two. First guy they have on here is Andrew Luck. And this is coming really close to becoming a potentially sad tale. The Colts are on the verge of doing something that's almost impossible to do, and that is screwing up the prime of a once every 10-year QB prospect to the point where his body is beginning to fall apart already, and he's only 28 years old. The guy gets the hell beat out of him each and every week because they refuse to build an O-line. They brought in old backs, old receivers. They drafted badly at receiver. They have no defense. Their front office has been a mess. He's coached by a buffoon. But when he's in there, they win. He turns the ball over a lot, but again, he's forced into so many bad situations that it's inevitable. It's going to happen. But, again, like I said, if we're going to be consistent, the tier one guys, they rise above that stuff. They can throw the ball at a high rate and not make the big mistake. So I think tier two is fair for him. Derek Carr. I think Derek Carr is on the cusp of being a tier one. The college spread QB that's done good. I think it's just a matter of time. He just has not been around for long enough yet. But as the old guard ages out of the league, I think he's going to be right up there near the top. Next guy they have on this tier is Philip Rivers. I think this is a combination of a couple of factors. Age, not enough winning, and a lot of turnovers lately. He threw 21 INTs and he fumbled 7 times. That's just crazy. Still puts up, a lot of yardage. They throw the ball downfield an awful lot in that offense. He still competes. He still brings it. But the turnovers in the past few years are just crazy, and that's a sign of a guy who's just trying to force things and do too much. Keenan Allen going down hurt a lot. Travis Benjamin didn't do all that much, and how good is Terrell Williams really? I mean, he had a decent year because someone else had to, but not a whole heck of a lot there to work with. And as a result, I think he presses more than he used to. Matthew Stafford. Matthew Stafford they have as a tier two, the former captain of the Enigma All Stars. Stafford used to be the quintessential Enigma quarterback. All the talent in the world. Strong arm, good athlete, can make throws that most guys can only dream of, but you just never knew what was going on upstairs in his head. Plus, Calvin Johnson was a tremendous security blanket. However, I don't know. Kind of like Matt Ryan, I need to see it one more time. I think the coordinator helps him out an awful lot. I still have trouble accepting that we live in a world where a guy named Jim Bob Cooter is one of the better offensive coordinators in the entire league, but, he is. And I gotta give him credit for the fact that he got better when Calvin Johnson left. Everyone thought that he would get exposed and exposed hard, but he played really, really well. The last, 2 years have been very good, so, I can't really call him a 2.5 like I would like to. I got to give it to him. He deserves to be there. Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson, they have as a 2. I think Russell Wilson proved to people that he he's better than a caretaker who needs to rely on that defense and that he can make plays on his own. He gets very little help. Hideous offensive line. The running game hasn't been the same since Marshawn Lynch left, and the offensive coordinator is a complete clown, one of the worst in the entire league. He's got a walking mismatch in Jimmy Graham and can't figure out ways to get him open. And as a result, Russell is hung out to dry every single week, running for his life, and he produces. He gets it done. I don't think he's a guy who has to operate within the confines of power run, zone read, play action. I think he can go out there and straight drop back throw it and win you games that way if he has to. Eli Manning. Eli Manning they have as a tier 2, but to me he's closer to a 3 to me. He's an enigma guy. Eli is super streaky. He can go 2 or 3 weeks at a time where he just looks completely scattershot, and then out of nowhere, and he's throwing darts all over the field. And it usually happens late in the season and in the playoffs. Eli can carry a team for a month, but he can also throw 3 INTs in a game and throw half of his passes to the turf. And I really don't like him in Ben McAdoo's offense, which is basically a variation of what the Packers run. I don't think it's a good fit. I mean, precise rhythm passing, that's just not the way Eli is wired. He was much better. In my opinion, he was at his best when Gilbride was there running that pro style run and shoot, where there was a lot more improv. People look at his last name and think he's like his brother. He's actually the polar opposite. Go YouTube Archie Manning. He's much more like his dad than he is Peyton. He's just slower. Peyton thrived in structure. Eli is much more of an improv guy. Cam Newton. I think Cam is a 3. In retrospect, the Super Bowl year was fun and I enjoyed it and I loved how he played, but I think the further we get away from it, the more that's going to prove to be an outlier. Cam can only play one way. He has to be used as a runner in order to get the most out of him, and the thing you worry about is, him getting injured or what's going to happen when his legs start to go. I think things could get ugly really fast when he hits that stage of his career, when he can't rely on just being a superhuman athlete anymore. Kirk Cousins. Can Kirk Cousins repeat what he did last year with no Pierre Garcon and no Deshaun Jackson? And, you still have Jordan Reed there. You're going to have Jamison Crowder. And you're also going to have a guy who's only played receiver for, 2 years? I think he's a bit of an overachiever in a positive way, of course. He's going to make a lot of money. He's going to make himself an awful lot of money. He won't get Stafford money, but he'll get something, pretty respectable. And let me touch on that for a moment. You got to pay them. Detroit has to pay Stafford, and Washington better not screw around and pay this man, because who are you going to play there? Who are you going to get? You can't replace these people. People were making fun of the Stafford contract, but what's Detroit going to do? Let him hit the open market? That'd be insane. What's the alternative to not paying Matthew Stafford? I'll tell you what the alternative is. The alternative is you got Brian Hoyer playing quarterback for you. And that's if you're lucky. If you're lucky, you got Hoyer or Case Keenum. If you're not, you got the McCowns, Brock Osweiler, Tom Savage, guys like that. And you're in QB hell for the next decade because you were too cheap to pay your quarterback. You can't hide your quarterback anymore. You have to be able to score and take pressure off of your defense, since the defense has all the cards stacked against them now the way the game is played. The only way that works is if you have your defense playing at a historically high level, like the Broncos did when they dragged Peyton Manning through that Super Bowl game. Otherwise, you'll be just scrounging around in mediocrity forever. Tier 3 is headed by Dak Prescott. That alone will make Cowboy fans riot, I'm sure. Cowboy fan treats Dak Prescott like he's the damn Messiah. Personally, sorry, I'm just not sold. He's in a terrific situation, and he hasn't screwed it up. But the way I look at it is like this. I think if you put Dak Prescott on Philly, and if you put Carson Wentz on Dallas, I don't think Dak Prescott does as well as Carson Wentz did, and I think Carson Wentz does more than what Dak Prescott did. I think Carson Wentz could be one of the top 3 to 5 players in the league 5 years from now. To me, he's shaky when he can't rely on play action. When he has a straight drop back and throw it, I don't see it. I'm not saying that he can't do it. I just haven't seen enough of it yet. So yeah, I think 3 is fair until we see more. Joe Flacco. Flacco to me is a worse Eli Manning. He's not overly accurate. He throws bad INTs, and he needs a strong supporting cast. I think when he's asked to do too much or when he has to go out and win the game for you, he becomes a turnover machine. I don't like Flacco. I don't like Flacco at all. Carson Palmer. Carson Palmer, I just think he's shot more than anything else. I think Bruce Arians got the last bit of gas he had in the tank a couple of years ago, and I think it's a gradual descent into retirement for Carson Palmer. I just don't think he has much left. You know what's interesting about Tier 3? Tier 3 is the largest tier out of the 5. It's where most of the league lives. If you don't have a Tier 1 or a Tier 2, you're living in a world where you gotta really coach your team up because your margin for error begins to shrink dramatically. The next 2 guys are pretty much joined at the hip, Mariota and Winston, and it's looking like I'm going to be wrong on both of them. I wasn't really confident in Mariota. Again, college spread quarterback disease. I just didn't think he'd have a easy time translating, but he's done very well. He's done really well. And Winston, I just thought Winston would be a turnover machine, a bit of a knucklehead, and he still might be, but I have a hunch he's going to put up some really big numbers this year, and he's going to vault into that Tier 2 category. They have a shot to be really, really good on offense. Really good. The next 2 are Andy Dalton and Alex Smith, and really these 2 guys are younger and older versions of each other. What I like about them is that they both get the most out of their ability and they don't beat themselves. When they lose, it's because they're being forced to do something within the course of a game that they're just not good enough to do. Alex Smith especially. Alex Smith is better than people think. Has he had the kind of career that you'd expect a guy taking number 1 overall would have? No, he hasn't. But he's played really well for a while now. His problem is you're always looking for a reason to bench him. That's what happened to him in San Francisco. He got hurt, and when you put in a guy who's a better athlete than him, has a stronger arm than he does, you just forget about him. That's what happened with Kaepernick. That's what's eventually going to happen with Pat Mahomes. But really, he's been solid. Both him and Dalton, they both need a strong supporting cast. They need a good running game or a good defense or a big-time receiver, and they both need to be coached up. And Alex Smith has had better coaching situations, with Harbaugh and now with Andy Reid than Dalton has with Marvin Lewis at the helm. But that's offset because Dalton has had guys like A.J. Green and Tyler Eifert, and he has a good defensive team as well to work with. Carson Wentz. I am a Carson Wentz believer. I think he has a decent chance of arriving ahead of schedule. I think he'll be at worst a Tier 2 with a better than decent chance of being a Tier 1 within, 3 years. Ryan Tannehill. Ryan Tannehill is in that enigma category. Personally, I think he's terrible. But again, he's one of those guys who's getting paid an awful lot of money because he has enough good moments that you're afraid of scrapping him and ending up with someone who's worse. And that leads us right into Jay Cutler, who will be playing for Tannehill thanks to a knee injury. And, if you want the poster boy for the Tier 3 quarterback, just as Tony Romo is the poster boy for the Tier 2 quarterback, Jay Cutler is your quintessential Tier 3. King Enigma. Coaches and GMs have gotten fired trying to figure him out. He's got one of the great arms the league has ever seen, but Lord knows what goes on in his head. God knows if he even cares. He has 0 intangibles. He has 0 leadership skills. He's just an all-around nightmare, and it's only a matter of time before his cancerous ways poisons the locker room and he gets somebody else fired. We know how this movie's going to end. Sam Bradford. Sam Bradford is living proof that completion percentage can be overrated. I mean, does anyone really believe that Sam Bradford is one of the most accurate passers in the league. I don't, and I'm sure most people don't either. I think he's a guy who's been beat up and hit so much that he looks to get rid of the ball as soon as he possibly can. I don't think he wants to push the ball downfield. I don't think he can push the ball downfield. Can't think of a team that would be excited to have him out there playing quarterback for him. Don't really think so. And the last guy in the third tier is Tyrod Taylor. To me, Tyrod Taylor could only be your starter if you run a certain type of offense. You have to be run heavy. You have to have a lot of QB runs as well, and some zone read and some play action. If you ask him to be a drop back passer, that's not going to end very well. And that leaves you with a pretty limited quarterback. I mean, if a guy can only start for, small handful of teams in the league based off of the style of offense that they run, or if you have to create an offense that severely limits what you can do drop back passing wise, that's probably a guy who should really be a backup quarterback. And that leads us to tier number 4. These are your Trevor Simeons of the world. And sure enough, Trevor Simeon ends up in this tier. He's the first quarterback they have listed in this tier. And, really, this is probably more of an indictment of Paxton Lynch than anything else, and, him not being ready to play. I mean, Trevor Simeon is, maybe he can become captain game manager, that type of quarterback, but you're not going to get much more than that, I don't think. Mike Glennon, I actually liked Glennon, back when he was in Tampa. For whatever reason, they didn't like him. He played fairly well, but they obviously do something that we don't, and it looks like they may be right. He didn't look terrific in the preseason by any stretch, but we'll see what happens when the lights are on. But he looks like, at best, a guy who could be captain game manager. You don't really see anything that leaps out at you from him at all. And the rest of the guys here are guys you would expect. Brian Hoyer, Tom Savage, Paxton Lynch, Jared Goff. If the Rams are wrong about Jared Goff, that's a catastrophe. Ugh. Josh McCown, Brock Osweiler, Cody Kessler. These are the guys that you end up with when you screw up drafting a quarterback, or you're too cheap to pay your own, and you have just no chance. So there you go. Anyway, I'd like to hear your guys' thoughts. Hope you guys enjoyed. Talk to y'all later. Peace.